Hello and welcome to the Michael Calderin Show. We're so glad you could join us. And for those that had an opportunity to tune in to our last show with Belinda Stoner, who is a classically trained violinist, definitely you want to go back and listen to her and her music. And I'm really excited about today's guest, Lori Lizarraga. Did I say their last name correctly, Lori?
Michael, you got it.
All right, thank you. So Lori is an Ecuadorian-Mexican-American journalist from Texas and a Murrow and Emmy-award-winning international reporter. With 5 years in the industry, Lori has worked in newsrooms in Texas, California, Colorado, and Pennsylvania, specializing in race, culture, and social justice reporting. The 27-year-old gained national attention last year with her piece, LatinXed, chronicling her experience as a journalist of color in news. That reporting forced new standards of immigration coverage at more than 60 television stations across the country and has been recognized by the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, the ACLU, the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and national news outlets like NPR and Futuro Media for her outstanding work to further the civil rights and liberties of Coloradans and Latinos across the country. Today, she continues that work as a speaker, guest lecturer, and advocate for journalists of color and the communities they represent. Very, very impressive bio for a young
Michael.
7-year-old media professional.
Thank you so much. And thanks for inviting me to talk with you today. I so appreciate the invitation. I'm honored to get to have conversation. That's what's so cool about this remote world. It's sort of brought us together in ways to have conversations with people I feel like we wouldn't otherwise be able to. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And you know, I came across that article and it was on Twitter. I don't remember who retweeted it, but obviously someone I'm connected with. Maybe through the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, but it was retweeted and it caught my eye because the topics are near and dear to my heart as well. So let's dive right into it, if you will.
Please.
You know, and let's talk about and again, you know, you are an Emmy award winning and Murrow recipient, which, you know, those are pretty prestigious awards to receive. So congratulations to you on that.
Thank you very much. There's much more boxes to check in terms of, you know, what we can win on the level of awards, but we don't do it for that, do we? It's cool to be recognized. It feels great, but the work is so important, and journalism is such a cool field because it really just serves such an important role in our society. And it really can be the difference of seeing progress in people's lives or recognition where there wasn't any before, or problems solved, prayers answered. I mean, truly, it's such a powerful industry and field to be in. So I'm honored that people get, you know, make these awards so that we can be recognized for really good and important work. But of course, the reward is the work for me, you know, and when you're doing good work, it really feels much more important to have your community get to benefit from the journalism.
Did you always want to be a journalist?
You know, Michael, I tell these stories of people who have, you know, wanted to be like anchorman or, you know, the weather woman ever since they were kids. And I love those stories so much. That is not mine. So I wish I had some great tale to tell of like, oh yeah, you know, since I was 4 years old. But I mean, truthfully, we're from a very small town. My parents are immigrants, but I was born in Louisiana and they moved us to a small town in Texas. If anybody listening to this is familiar with Waxahachie, Texas, that is where I was born and raised. I usually say Dallas just for the sake of people being able to pinpoint where in the world I grew up, but it is nothing like Dallas. I think when we moved there, there was a Burger King, and that is it. And us. It's gotten a lot bigger since then, but I mean, that was, you know, almost 30 years ago. So is a very small town, and we watched the news. I know that my dad would wake up and turn the news on, but it never really truly occurred to me that that was a job that you could do. And, when I was graduating from kindergarten, I said, when I couldn't say my R, so I said, I'm Loy Lizarraga, and when I grow up, I want to be a pastor, which is what my grandpa brought our family to the States to do. He's a pastor. My dad is also a pastor. My older brother is a worship pastor. So that was sort of what I knew, right? And I think I tell that story about my kindergarten graduation because you only know what you know. And
Right.
I was surrounded by a bunch of pastors. I knew I could be a teacher because I had one. And I knew that I could be a doctor because I also would go see the doctor. But outside of that, I think we say the sky's the limit, but sometimes we don't truly understand that there's a job for everything. And there are ways to do work that you love and that you're really, really good at and passionate about. And I went into college believing that my responsibility was to put myself through school and make a better future for my family, because of the sacrifices my family made to bring us to this country and afford us these opportunities. So I put myself through school, and originally was a business major, and I stayed a business major. That's what I, had a scholarship for at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. But I was struggling, Michael. I was in classrooms with, some of the smartest people I'd ever met, and certainly wasn't tapping into some of the skills that just come to me innately and naturally, and that I have a lot of fun with. And so my dad gave me great advice coming out of, some like tragic econ test or accounting something or another that I walked out of, just like in tears, like, I'm not going to pass. I think I passed. I don't think there were many tests I failed, but I was like, I needed the curve every time. And my dad said, why don't you take a public speaking class or a communications class or something, just to help your GPA out, but also to remind you that there are some things that you do that you just do naturally and really well, and it'll come very easy to you. And I think you seem like you need that boost of encouragement about yourself. And it was great advice. And I forget that we don't talk a lot about the ways that you can go to college, and instead of working to get the jobs that are going to make you the most money, which is fantastic, and I still would love to make a lot of money, but you can also go to school or specialize in things that you're passionate about and that you have a lot of fun doing, and it doesn't have to be hard. And for me, public speaking wasn't. I was thrilled. I had to memorize other people's speeches. I wasn't even really writing my own speeches, so I was like memorizing the great words of other people that they've already wrote and done all the work on. Are you kidding? I can totally do that.
Right.
So, would stand up at the front of the class and recite great speeches or monologues, and there would be my peers in the room or my professor in tears or laughing, and I'm thinking, this feels great. It's not even my work. I'm just like reciting it back to you. I didn't even do anything. I had a lot of fun and realized, this might be worth spending a little more time in this realm, specializing and honing in on the stuff I'm good at. And so I added a communications major, and through that had to take, an audio visual class, some requirement for the communications major, and stumbled on accident into the journalism wing of the communications school, and couldn't find my class, pulled open this big door, peeking in every door, and one of them is big and heavy, and I pull it open, and there's an on-air sign above my head, a light. It's dark, but I look in, and there's this, gorgeous Black man sitting on an anchor desk, and cameras all around him, and this adorable girl on a green screen, and there's a technical director with a headset on and a microphone, and he turns around and is like, close the door. I was like, okay. And I walk out and, close the door, and it kind of shuts and does the moment of like, the hair poofs back. And I feel like I've just opened the wardrobe to Narnia, and I'm like, what was that? I want to do that. And that truly, Michael, is the weird random way that on my way to my second semester junior year, a little late, but never too late, I stumbled into truly, literally fell backwards into journalism and added it as my third major, graduated with 3 majors, have never used any of the other 2, frankly. I mean, it's great to have a business background
Sure.
in any, thing in your life, and certainly in journalism, but in terms of, the roles and the titles that I've had, it's been journalism from pretty much that day on.
Wow, amazing. Amazing.
It just goes to, show that it really does help to get out into the world and be exposed to the possibilities of what is out there, because without that, I just don't know that I would have found this whole world and gotten to do what I'm doing today, get to do what I'm doing today. So yeah, I encourage all of the mentees that I have, all the classes that I speak to, everybody who I talk to, just to make sure that you go out into the world and see things, because there's just so much out there we can't possibly begin to make up in our heads that's
Right.
truly as good or as exciting as what actually exists if you go and seek it out.
Wow. And I had no idea about your connection to, with having a dad who's a pastor and brother who are pastors. I had no idea that connection.
Well, all that to say, when I saw Reverend, I wasn't intimidated. And I did understand what it means anyway.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. So let's fast forward to the time that that you were moved to write this article, which I think it was written back. Ironically, it's already a year. It looks like it was March of 2021.
Yeah.
And it has gotten a lot of
you're coming up on the almost exact 1 year anniversary. It'll be in a couple of days, actually, Michael.
Yeah, March 28th.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that article has really gotten a lot of traction, a lot of attention, and from what I've been able to see, it's like a lot of minorities have said, yeah, that's what we deal with. So
yeah, absolutely.
Tell us about that. Tell us about what moved.
Michael, I was never, ever expecting that kind of traction that you're talking about, and certainly did not expect it to span across industry, beyond newsrooms, beyond journalists and reporters who are familiar with news. It really struck a chord with a lot of people, and certainly and mostly people of color across this country in all different fields and internationally as well. I mean, it truly, really did resonate with a lot of people who haven't felt seen or articulated in that way so publicly. And so, yeah, I mean, I could not have imagined the community that is out there who was feeling the same way. And what a shame that we came together over such difficult circumstances, but so much better to know that there is and are so many other people out there who understand. It helps you to just feel so much less alone and so much more, I guess, normal, or maybe not like the problem. You can kind of give yourself that you're not the problem if somebody else is going through it. Maybe it's not, me, maybe it's the system. And so that kind of validation, I think, for a lot of people was really, really important. And it made me feel a lot better too, as more and more people would reach out. It did sort of take the weight off my shoulders of, maybe I'm not good at this job, which is something that I think occurs to everybody who's not succeeding in a situation that they feel like they should be. I think the question, Michael, is what inspired the piece, or what maybe made me go so far as to write it?
Yeah, I mean, there had to be a crisis that occurred, right? Kind of building up to.
Well, if I may, I am a spiritual person. I am one of those people who sees everything as a sign. I might get even exhausting to those who are most immediately in my circle. I think that means something. You really may want to think on that. Let that, sit with you. I'm like very much like my dad and my grandpa in that way, but it has really served me very well to heed that intuition or to sort of sit in moments that feel significant. And for me, Michael, my life has always taken a trajectory where I can look back and see the significance of where I was at a particular time in my life and why that was so important to be there at that time in that place. And, you know, a lot of people throughout the struggles in Denver, those 2 years, and then after the piece came out, you know, said, you wish you'd gone somewhere else. And the truth is, you know, no, I think I was exactly where I was supposed to be in Denver. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not right. And I don't mean to sound like a saint. There were a lot of bad days where I, you know, cursed the decision to be in Denver and the burden that I felt like I was having to carry to be in that newsroom. And there were certainly less graceful choice words that I used along the way to express how I was going through all of that and weathering it. But truthfully, even while it was going on, I was really aware that there were a lot of circumstances that were happening during my 2 years that were timing wise just really significant that I was in the room at that time. The biggest one, you know, that the title of the piece speaks to is that myself, along with 2 other Latinas over the course of, you know, 12 calendar months, were let go in succession. And even just that really was timing that lent to the legitimacy of what I was writing about. I certainly wasn't alone in what was happening to our careers and the way that our work was being judged by our management. And that really created a track record that, you know, we look for when we're trying to do journalism like this, when we're trying to do work that shows a trend. Trend is helpful and sometimes hard to prove. In this case, I sort of was just standing there with a basket. I made this, you know, analogy all the time that I walked into the room in Denver, was holding my basket, and things, without really having to go very far, were just falling in that sort of were too important not to take note of it and to start realizing that there were massive and concerning trends that were happening among myself and my peers. And I got to the end of that 2 years, or very close to it, about, you know, the last 3 months of my contract. But certainly, really, Michael was talking about doing something like this, writing a piece, writing a book, saying something during the course of the entire 2 years I was there. But I got to the end of the time, and again, a lot of situations just kept happening that were too clear to me that I was in the right place at the right time to shed some light, say my truth, and that it could be listened to and that it would be quite powerful. I felt confident that I had a story, and I did not know that it would do all that it's done or be as well received as it has been, but certainly did feel as though the 2 years warranted something. And, you know, I debated, you know, is this a book? Is this a later thing? People told me if you write it, you'll be blacklisted from the industry. Maybe wait till you're more established, till people can't ruin your career. But it felt like if I did wait, I would be, you know, writing potentially about a different newsroom, writing potentially about people who are no longer there, which didn't seem fair, and missing the moment of all of the timeliness of everything I had been given. So, you know, I did feel that the timing was important, that I did it and I did it soon, so that it would be, you know, a fair representation of who was still in the room when it came out.
Right. And I don't know, as you're talking and as I reflect on the article that you wrote, what comes to mind for me is you were a voice that was not going to be silenced.
Mm.
And they were not going to control you. And they were not going to manage your message.
Mm.
And I'm looking at, in your article, I'm going to quote here. Back in the
Sure.
newsroom, I would raise a concern that would become a familiar point of contention over the next 2 years. Managers reviewing my piece told me I was not allowed to describe the young man in my story, or anyone else for that matter, as undocumented while at 9 News. Instead, I was instructed to use here illegally or illegally in the country. For 2 years, I explained that I was not comfortable with that verbiage and how could it discourage my community from this platform. For 2 years, my managers repeated the 9 News guidelines. So that's quite a directive,
Mm.
you know, to not be able to say undocumented and to rather say, you know, illegally. How did that sit in your gut?
You know, Michael, you're Latino. You're also a human being who has attachment to people and community and feels for people. I think I see that. I'm a person who feels deeply for people and for community, but I am also Latina. And there is something about protecting my community and our stories that is very deeply rooted in how I was raised, and what I believe in and stand for. And I think it's hard not to see other Latinos, and see my family in them and see my community in so many of their stories, see so many similar experiences, shared struggles, and have an immediate connection, not always for the same reasons, but we have so much in common. And seeing, you know, the student who I was writing about in that particular situation, and every person who I would go on to write about and talk with who was undocumented, would be to me like my grandma, would be to me like my uncles, would be to me like my mom before she got her citizenship, would be to me like, I could never call you illegal because I would never call them illegal. And so it was more than just advocating for, you know, culturally sensitive or appropriate language for this stranger. It became about my family, about my community. And if I would advocate for more fair representation of my grandma's situation in this country, then I would advocate for anybody's fair representation of their situation in this country. And so, yeah, it was very, very unsettling. And beyond that, Michael, it was also difficult to feel like the expertise that I have coming from the community I come from was also put into question. It's difficult to assert that you are the expert in everybody's community and in everybody's walk of life and their lived experiences. And certainly I don't purport that I can do that.
I mean, I could see where you could also feel like you were betraying the community.
Totally.
By calling them illegal versus undocumented.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the major goal of the stories that we do ever in news and journalism, but especially in a place like Colorado that is predominantly a white city, in Denver, and a white state, is that if you are subscribing and ingesting this sort of information from a mainstream source, like the station I was at, our job is, I think, to try to teach you some things along the way, to inform you. And certainly if the ways that we inform you about your community outside of, your street and outside of your workplace is that you can expect from the Black community for there to be crime, you can expect for there to be shootings in the poor places, and that you can expect Latinos to come in and steal all your jobs, and they're all undocumented and they're all quote unquote here illegally. If the only ways that you are educated about anybody else outside of your immediate community is in the context of the worst version of us that you could possibly ever ingest, then we are really doing a disservice to all of those people and all of those communities outside of yours. And certainly we're doing a disservice to you as a viewer because we're not informing you of the facts about those communities, about your neighbors, about the kids and the families living down the street. It wouldn't be fair, and it isn't at all representative of what those communities bring to your city and to your neighborhood. And I think when you say something like illegal, you have really gone ahead and leaned into what some of your viewers might already believe or think they know about this group of people or about this community, about undocumented immigrants or immigrants in general who even, have their green card, have a visa, have asylum, have citizenship, are even born here, but still look very Latino. If what you do is reiterate a perception of a community that is incorrect and unfair, then I think that you've really done the viewer and you've done the community that you're speaking about a huge disservice. And I just felt like if we're going to be fair to these communities and telling their stories, then we should also make sure that we are paying attention to the power of the language we're using, because it is sort of contrast and contradictory, right? To tell a story trying to have you see this undocumented student's struggle to get into college, but I'm calling him illegal all along the way. I mean, do you really want somebody doing illegal things, going to school with your, college-aged daughter or son, or your brothers? I mean, you know what I mean? So it's like, I'm asking to pull at your heartstrings. I'm asking you to give this person attention. I'm also confusing you, I think, with this kind of contradictory language at the same time. And I just don't think that is always necessary. Illegal is also definitely not even always correct. And it is an impossible thing to just be an illegal human anyway. But certainly if we're talking about journalism and journalists and reporting, we know one of the most powerful tools we have is the language we use and the words that we lend to the people we're talking about. And that just felt like such a missed opportunity to be more fair and to be better educators.
Right. And actually in your article, you also reference Sonia Gutierrez, who was let go from 9 News in 2020. And during her time there, she could not cover immigration unless she disclosed her own immigration status on TV. And what was that about?
The idea was that,
crazy to me.
Certainly, Michael. And, you're right to think that. Can you imagine if we had to preface every single time one of your anchors or reporters went on TV, if we had to preface what we were about to talk about with like the ways that we're connected to it in life? I mean, my God, the laundry list of potential biases that we could blend to a story just for being a human who has lived and breathed as long as we have and interacted with other people on this earth and interacted with life. We would have to be disclosing all kinds of potential biases if this was the same standard that everybody, if everybody was held to the same standard that they were asking Sonia to be held to. The idea was that, and what can I say? I'm not going to defend the ask that they put on her, because I very much don't agree with it or stand by it, but I think the idea was that if we come out the gate letting people know that you have this connection potentially to this story, that then, they can see that we're being upfront, or giving you a chance to I don't know the details of this person's proximity to the immigrant community or the undocumented community. I don't know. The further and further I get from the situation, the less I can try to even make it make sense, because it's ridiculous. What it did and what
I don't think you can make sense of it. It just, it defies common sense.
I mean, what it successfully did, the ask of Sonia to disclose her immigration status, the ask to have us call our communities illegal. I mean, what it did, what the intentions were, I'm not going to speak to that. Maybe there was a lot of good intention. Maybe it truly was an effort to be on the up and up, or to be transparent, or what have you. But I mean,
I'm gonna go with it.
What it effectively did was discourage us, the people who are most qualified to talk about our communities, to stop talking about our communities. Because if you do the thing that journalists do, especially Latinos, who are in many cases building or rebuilding relationships and connection to communities like the Latino undocumented community, or Spanish-speaking community, first-gen community, all of these communities are, they have been neglected in coverage for a long time. And so to have to build those relationships and get those sources, it takes a lot of work. And so you do all the work, and then what? The ask is that, okay, let me tell your story, and I'm going to call you illegal while we do it. I mean, you wonder, after all that work, did you really win? Did you really get what you wanted? You've spent so much time gaining trust, building relationship, making inroads, to let the Latino community you're trying to represent use the platform of news to tell their stories, to highlight the issues that are facing their communities. And then the caveat is, once you've done all of that and you finally get to do the work of giving them a platform, you're writing your work off and the story off because you're too close to it. Oh, you're an immigrant. You can't possibly tell this story well then, right? I mean, no, she's got a bias. She's coming out the gate. She's already telling us that this is going to be, skewed to one way or the other. And this is, I wonder if this is even correct, or if this is being just way too fair to this community, way too sympathetic. I wonder if they even tried to get the, other side or represent them fairly. And again, with the language, if we are just using language that says illegal, I mean, is it worth all that work at the end of the day? Did you win letting them use this platform, or did you really just do them an even greater disservice? And that's really what it effectively did for us, and for lots of other journalists who feel like if you use this platform to represent the causes that you care about and the people who are closest to you, who deserve coverage, is it really benefiting them, or is it just helping to reiterate preconceived misinformation about communities that your viewers already believe? And it just, you did feel, like you said, Michael, a bit of, betrayal almost towards your community for even putting them in that situation.
Right.
And so, there was as the years went, from my experience at 9 News, and same with my peers and Sonia and Kristen, and other, Latinos who would come and go, they would all sort of agree with me to the extent that it just became a battle not worth fighting, and a community that forfeited a lot of great opportunities to use, the news as a platform to get their stories out there. It was really such a lose-lose scenario. You weren't doing the job you want to do for the people you want to do it for, but you also couldn't do it for them if it came with all of these barriers.
Right. And Kristen Aguirre had a stroke. correct?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
And she was let go, was it like 11 months after? her
Yeah,
strike?
that's right. Less than a year. Mhm.
So is it that, would you say, and just a thought here, but,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'm sure this goes on not just in newsrooms, but in other industries as well.
Hmm.
In certain cases, they want to be able to check the box that, hey, we're diverse and we have Latinos, we have people of color, and they want to be able to check those boxes, but they don't want you to really be who you are. Does that kind of summarize that?
Yeah, I mean, totally. I think that there's tons of tokenism. I think there's tons of, we, especially in the wake of the social justice movement in 2020 and George Floyd's murder. I mean, I think there's a lot of lip service to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, representation. But it is different, right? To say we have 25% people of color. And then have those people of color truly being voices in the room, especially if those voices are quite contrast to the ideas that you've been bringing to the table, and having your company or newsroom or organization take as just truth when you say it. To have that sort of combated potentially for the first time in many spaces and for many people. Yeah, it's definitely a matter of, checking a box, but we're not going to make comprehensive cultural changes. We're not going to make comprehensive language changes. We're not really asking you to do more than be in the room. And I can't imagine being somebody who would want to try and pretend like you could do a good job without having voices from every single walk of life. I mean, that just seems like you're asking for trouble. You're asking to get things wrong, because we just can't be good at knowing and identifying with all of the diverse communities and the diverse backgrounds that come as a part of this country, as a part of our society. So it seems like it's so intuitive to me to want to have that representation, but it is also really, really different than the way things have been done for a really, really long time. And I know change can be threatening. And I am aware that while I see the value, there is a reason that tokenism is a thing.
Right.
That it's very well known that you can get hired to be the one, check a box, and and then everybody keeps it moving. And while that to me seems like such a wasted opportunity, we hear the word tokenism and we know what it is. We know what it means to be a diversity hire. So, I mean, as much as it blows my mind that is a thing that's happening, we know words like that. We understand what they mean. And if we understand what they mean and we're not learning that phrase or the definitions of those words in school, we are just familiar with them in life enough that I can say those words and we're all in agreement that we understand the background of what it means to be a diversity hire, what it means to be a token. And so that means it's happening enough that we're all just totally clued in to what it is to do that. So I mean, that's a shame that that's such a commonly known thing that happens. But yeah, that definitely means it's happening enough that it's commonplace verbiage that we're all very understanding of.
Right. And what would your message be to a younger Lori, to a Lori who is in high school, considering journalism, considering going into media?
What would my advice be? It's a great question. Michael, it's tough because I'm one of those people who is hard-headed enough. You can tell me just the path to success. You could map it out. You could write it down. And I still would be like, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate this. I'm going to find my own way, even though you told me this is like the $1 billion path. Right. So it's tough because what would I tell myself? I mean, so many things, but again, you don't know what you don't know. I am one of those people who deeply needs to, I get it through my own head when I experience things for myself. And so I think I could tell little Lori all kinds of things. And I would be like, girl, I'm going to be able to work it out. You probably just were being too much or, asking for too much or, I'm people like me. I've got this. And then, the story would go the exact same way. So I think, it's tough. I want to have some great piece of advice for my high school self or my college self. But I think I am one of those people who truly could hear all the advice in the world. And I think I might have and still did all the things I did right and wrong because that is the path that I decided to take. I think I would say to my younger self, that you are talented and worthy, and I'm going to take the path I'm going to take, but I think it's in these situations, especially as marginalized communities, it's really easy to be so gaslit into believing that you're the problem or that you're the unique and lone person who is not fulfilling the expectations and responsibilities the way all your peers are. To not get along is such a difficult experience. You don't want to be the outsider. You don't want to not be well liked. And it can make you feel like you truly are uniquely on the outside of something seemingly everybody else understands and gets. And so I guess instead of advice, I might just offer encouragement. Because especially in spaces where you are the only fill in the blank woman, the only Latino, the only young person, the only older person, the only LGBTQ, whatever that looks like, the only, religious person, the only not religious person. I mean, to be the only is lonely. And so I guess less than advice, I would just give encouragement, because validation for a lot of people, myself included, is it's lifeblood. It's what sustains you. And when you don't have it, you can start to really question your worth and question the things that at one point you knew you were really, really good at. And now maybe you just lost your touch. So yeah, I think I would just encourage younger Lori to see herself, even in the times where people make you feel like you're not much. Because I think it's really cool that can't be taken from you, right? No matter what anybody says, you are still who you are. And if you can kind of hold on to that, I think it's helpful in sustaining yourself through difficult times.
So what's Lori's next step?
Oh, great question, Michael. I'm asking myself that. I've gotten such a unique and wonderful year as a result of the piece. I could have never, ever imagined the catalyst it would be for my career and for my life. I put a piece out a year ago that I thought would be the potential last piece of journalism that I would be allowed to do. And I really felt like it was a hill I was willing to die on, Michael. And I'm so glad that it didn't have to be that. It has catapulted me to this national level. And now I think it's great that a year later, and even less than that, really, at the end of last year, I sort of got to a point where I was missing journalism and reporting the way I never thought that I would. And all I want to do is get back to the work that I love, and get back to holding people accountable, shining light in dark places, telling people's stories, giving a platform to people who really deserve to see the power of what news and journalism can do when it's working on the behalf of communities that haven't always been the beneficiaries of this kind of coverage and this kind of attention. And so, yeah, now is a matter of facing an industry again, with a lot of new knowledge, with a lot of, in my opinion, sort of like this master's program over the last year of getting better and more articulate about the things that I care about and the ways that I want to improve the industry at large. Some would call that baggage. But that's one of the great things about the position I'm in right now, as I sort of try to find the next exact right reporting role or journalism role, is that for those who don't want to have conversations with me, it's a really great agreement, I think, that we're making, that if you close the door on me, it is definitely not a place or a management team that I need to be working with. And I don't want to repeat the mistakes of my past. And so any doors that are already closed to me are doors I never should have walked through anyway. And now just finding the place that can let sort of someone as excited as me about what I care about, but as serious and passionate and stern about the ways that I know it needs to be done better on behalf of our communities. It's about finding the place that can see all of those things as assets and not liability. And I'm taking my time, Michael, to make sure that I find the right fit so that, you know, it doesn't get snuffed out. Because I think I was on the verge of that. You know, I think I was close to it not being worth it. And that is a disservice to our communities. It's a disservice to the industry of journalism. And I'm not saying I'm the gift to this industry, but all of us who come in with these perspectives.
You're a gift.
Thank you, Michael. I truly think that, though, that every single one of us who comes into an industry that for so long has been without us makes us extremely, extremely valuable to how it changes and how it better includes all of us in it. And news is a big one that needs us in the room. And so I am really, really glad that I've gotten this season to feel re-energized. And now I'm just looking for the place to take these to take these skills and to take all this passion and make it be the right fit. And luckily, Michael, you know, I think the industry is a changing place, and there are a lot of people who I'm in conversation right now who do look at the things that I'm bringing to the table and the conversations that I am having, and see that as a really good thing. So I'm very, very excited, hopefully, to have a true concrete answer for you in terms of where I'm going. I'm interviewing right now, so we will see.
Yeah.
And we'll have to have a follow-up date so I can let you know how that all shakes out.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Again, I applaud you not only for your accomplishments, but for you taking a stand and really saying enough is enough, and being, you know, having that courage to put out that article, which, you know, I'm sure many people in your position have thought about it and didn't do it for fear of, you know, compromising their career.
Yeah.
But you're also a person of faith. So, you know, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. So, you know that, you know, if you have God on your side, then doesn't matter who's against you, right?
Right.
And we need more people like you. We need more professionals like you that take a stand for issues in social justice and you know, things that just are not right. And now is the time. Now is the time to change. I want to give a plug to Alicia Menendez, who came out with a book, The Likability Trap, because I think she talks about a lot of similar issues in her book.
That's a great recommendation. You're like the third person actually in recent days who has mentioned that book. It's on my to-do list. I've got to get it. I've heard just great things.
Well, you know what? I'm going to send it to you as a gift.
Thank you, Michael. You're too sweet.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes, no, and thank you. You are welcome to come back anytime you like, as often as you like.
Thank you.
To definitely,
tread lightly. You'll be sick of me after a while. I'll be back every week, Michael.
You can come back as often as you like. Trust me.
Thank you.
And I just want to mention, if you want to connect with Lori, go to her website at www.lorilizarraga.com, and that's LORILIZARRAGA.com. Connect with her on Twitter as well. And any last comments?
Thank you so much. I love the way that you have been so supportive and giving me your platform to come on and talk about this 1 year later. The more that we talk about representation and standing up for yourself, the more I think people feel encouraged to do so in the spaces they're in. So I just really appreciate you taking this hour to talk to me, and hopefully somebody feels encouraged today by our conversation. I know I do.
Absolutely. Thank you. And if you want to listen to a previous show, you can look up the Michael Calderin Show, available on Anchor, Spotify, Apple iTunes, and other platforms. We thank you so much for tuning in. If you have an idea for a future show, send me a message and let me know. We thank you so much. You've been tuned to the Michael Calderin Show. Thank you.